Hello, it's Joseph, and welcome back to another episode of Colonizing Kerbin. And in this episode, number 24, it has finally happened. The colonists have arrived at Duna, and we can finally colonize this beautiful red planet that you see the colony ship circularizing itself around. Wow, I had a lot of fun filming this episode, I have to say. After all the work in building this colony ship, getting all the Kerbals up into it, getting all the craft and cargo into it, it felt very rewarding to have all that work pay off and finally get here and perform everything and not see this ship blow up. I was very concerned. If you saw the episode a couple episodes ago, I was very concerned that this thing, when firing the engines with all of the different parts, something would go wrong and it would explode. But hey, we got here safely. Everything is working just fine. And now our ring habitat has separated from the colony craft and is reorienting itself, and we can now assemble this space station that is going to be in orbit and serve as a gateway station for future colonization efforts of this planet. So this is the docking module. If you've seen my other ring stations in the series, this is essentially the same concept, a hitchhiker storage module with 3 docking arms. But these 3 docking arms, of course, had to have each their own procore and monopropellant and RCS thrusters in order for them to be reassembled in orbit. And so now that I have everything lined up, that is now attached. It also has a large docking port underneath, so that way we can also attach this large fuel tank. It has a large monopropellant tank and a couple of large fuel tanks, so that way craft coming up from Duna can refuel themselves. Here's one of the craft that will be coming up. This is the cargo variant. So this contains a couple of cargo modules, and you'll see what's in that cargo when we get down to the surface in a little bit. So essentially, craft can refuel themselves one of 2 ways. Either they can refuel themselves on the surface. The surface base comes equipped with drills and fuel converters and ore tanks. So the craft can refuel themselves on the surface, come up to the space station, and then return to the surface of Duna. Or they can refuel in orbit. So they don't have to do it both ways. There's enough delta V in the craft that they can get up into orbit and back down, or vice versa, but they can't do 2 trips without refueling at some point. So, all right, so the colony ship, the core, is no longer needed, so we're going to allow it to crash into the surface of Duna. And by the way, the footage is sped up 4 times. You notice this lengthy pause here. That's because there's so many parts on that craft that it took a while for the game to figure out how to render the explosions. Well, the craft survived with only 1 damage, 1 problem, and Bill is out to fix that problem right now, though of course he's going to joyride through the rings just a little bit. And one of our radiators, I have absolutely no clue how this happened. Well, one of our radiators was broken, but thankfully, due to recent versions, updated versions of the game, an engineer can get out there with a repair pack and can repair the radiator. So now that that is done, we can now begin taking our first set of colonists down to the surface. So there are 24 Kerbals total on this entire space station and colony, but we're only going to bring about 18 Kerbals down. So Jeb, Bill, and Bersby are basically the lead scientist, lead engineer, and lead pilot of this expedition. But they're going to have some companions come down as well. Now this craft, the hitchhiker module, can store 4 Kerbals. So we can basically bring 7 Kerbals down with this module. Now to land on Duna, parachutes are not enough. So these parachutes are going to slow the craft down, but we're going to need to fire the aerospike engine just a little bit to safely land. The nice thing about the aerospike engine is that it has the same fuel efficiency at the sea level of a planet and at the Basically, the fuel efficiency of the engine stays the same from sea level up to the highest parts of the atmosphere, and no other engine is able to do that. So now that Jeb has planted the flag and founded this new colony on Duna, he's going to go to the surface base and get things activated and start getting things ready to go. The engineers are also going to leave the hitchhiker module and come over and assist him in getting everything operational on the surface base, getting the oxygen levels where they need to be, making sure all of the mechanics and everything are working, making sure the radar dish is functioning, communications are set up, and so forth. At the same time, Bill is going to repack all the parachutes, and he and Bersby, which, by the way, if you missed a previous episode, they were married in a previous episode. They did originally plan to get married on the surface of Duna, but there was a little drama involving Jeb, so see back to the earlier episodes when we were unlocking the tech tree to see what was going on. But anyway, the happy couple who are going to retire here with Jeb on the surface of Duna are going to get the Science Rover Mark II, which is a bit of an upgraded version just with additional storage. And they're going to head over here and they're going to set up some science equipment, the experimental modules that came out with the Breaking Ground DLC. And they're basically going to set up the control module, the goo monitor, the weather station, the seismometer, which is one of my favorites. And then, of course, they're going to set up a couple of RTGs and the communications dish so that science data can be transmitted back to Kerbin. We also brought along some light fixtures, so that way, if the Kerbals need to come out at night, and they don't just have to rely on their helmet LEDs, they can also use these lights to also see what they're doing. It gets pretty dark on Duna since it's a little bit farther away from the sun than Kerbin is. And then also it comes equipped with all the science gear. The Magnetomino broom is of course useless on the surface and in atmosphere. It needs to be used out of atmosphere off the surface of a celestial body, but we kind of brought it along for good looks. And in my headcanon, it still is useful in some ways on the surface. We also spotted some blueberries off in the distance, so we're going to use our scanning arm to collect some samples. And then, of course, Bersby's going to get out and collect some samples of their own. Now, you may be wondering, how are we going to get those samples back to Kerbin, and is that even necessary? Well, the surface base comes equipped with some pretty state-of-the-art science equipment, and it has its own laboratory. But of course, mass is a factor when you're trying to get all of this stuff to Duna. So, of course, back at Kerbin, they're probably going to be able to, eventually get, they're going to have some better scientific experiments and laboratories available. So, we're probably going to want to get those samples back to Kerbin in some way. How are we going to do that? You'll find out later. All right, so the Kerbins are going to enjoy the view, and who wouldn't want to enjoy the view being on a new planet? This is going to be your home for essentially, the rest of your life. You might as well take in the view. And we made sure to have plenty of windows for the Kerbins. You wouldn't want to live in a box where you couldn't see outside, right? All right, so Jeb is now going to head back up to the ring station and start bringing down the rest of the Kerbals. It's going to take about 3 or 4 trips total to get all the Kerbals down. It's going to take 4 trips because I used the cargo variant at one point. And so here's me showing you that we can make use of the fuel tank to refuel the craft in orbit, and that's how we decided to do it this time. So Jeb has picked up some more Kerbals, 3 engineers and 3 scientists, and now he's going to return down to the surface of Duna and allow these colonists to come in. Now, we came in at a pretty steep angle, so when we fired those parachutes, we almost exceeded the G limits of these Kerbals, but thankfully we didn't come in too fast to hurt anyone or freak anyone out too much. They've been well trained, these Kerbals. All right, so in order to refuel a craft, I have a little robotic arm with a couple of rotors and hinges and this claw. So you just need to get the craft to hop over and get close enough. Extend this claw and it will connect with the craft. And then of course we can refuel it using the drills and the ore tanks and the converters. Now in the game, and part of this is because we have engineers at level 3 and level 4 because we've been making use of the labs on the colony ship to upgrade their experience. The craft actually only took around, I believe it was like 3 to 5 hours as far as the game, not in real life, in the game. Oh, we were a little too accurate on the landing there. Thankfully we didn't damage anything. This pilot is not as experienced as Jeb, so he's a little bit more of a risk taker, I guess you can say. Anyway, it takes about 3 to 5 hours of in-game time to refuel the craft, which is not too bad. I've had some refueling missions where it can take well, years, quite frankly, to refuel a craft. All right, so let's show you what is in this cargo variant. This whole colony is kind of a big Pakrushka doll, however you pronounce that. All right, so this does come equipped with a claw so that any cargo we bring down, we can detach it with this claw. And basically this little craft that you're gonna see being brought out of the cargo bay is a little drone ship with a science experiment container. So this is how samples are going to be returned to Kerbin. So this little craft is basically inspired by what's going to eventually happen in real life on Mars. So Ingenuity is equipped to drop samples onto the surface of Mars, and then a little craft such as this is going to pick up the samples. By the way, a Kerbal has to jump on top of another Kerbal to put the experiments inside there. Interesting, right? Anyway, while this cargo container is going to move over and refuel itself, let me continue talking about the inspiration of the sample return vehicle. So the Ingenuity rover will be dropping samples on Mars, and then eventually a sample return vehicle will launch into orbit of Mars, just like this sample return will. And at the next Duna window in this game, we're going to send a sample return vehicle to rendezvous with it in orbit of Duna. Anyway, the craft that you saw being placed on the surface of Duna can get into orbit and return itself down to Duna all in one round. And then we can basically use the surface base to refuel it. Anyway, moving on, the Ike fuel tanker that's been sitting in orbit for a while is now docked with the station, and it has refueled the fuel tank of the station. And we're going to send it off to Ike in a second. But before we do, here is the cargo resupply module. This contains some ground anchors. We're not going to use them in the episode, but hopefully I'll figure out how to make use of them in the future. And it's going to dock with the station. Now, its transfer craft has over like 3,500 meters per second of delta V, so I decided not to waste it. I just put it in a higher orbit, and eventually it's going to be used to return the cargo resupply drone back to Kerbin. Basically, the Kerbins are going to want to send, you know, mementos and samples and all sorts of things back home. So we're going to keep the sample return drone and its transfer craft here. All right, so our 3 Kerbals, we have 1 pilot, a scientist, and an engineer, are going to head off to Ike, and they're going to land at the mining outpost that we landed back a couple episodes ago, and they're going to refuel the fuel tanker. Now, this is the one part of the entire playthrough of me filming all this footage where I really did not like what was happening, and I got pretty angry. This is probably the 4th or 5th time I've said something in this series about how 1.12 has basically ruined wheels. And as you can see, I have the brakes fully engaged. I'm gonna like throw the traction control up as high as I can. It doesn't matter what I do. This craft is completely uncontrollable. This craft is completely ruined. I built this craft back when 1.10 was out. I tested it on Ike. I tested it on the Mun and on Minmus. And it worked great. It worked perfectly. And now because of the update, the wheels are just completely, I had to fire the engines to get this craft to go up this hill. The landing legs don't seem to be a problem. As you can see, the base isn't rolling down the hill, but wheels, for some reason, wheels just are completely ruined. So I was, if you can't tell by the tone of my voice, I was pretty upset about this. And it took me, I think it took me about an hour in real life just to get this craft to dock with the station so I could refuel it. So most likely I will not be returning, but in my quote-unquote headcanon and the story of the Kerbals, they will return periodically to Ike to refuel this tanker, so that way the ring station in orbit of Duna, the tank there will be kept refueled, so that if craft on the surface need it, they can be refueled in kind. Alright, so our final set of Kerbals are going to be coming down to the surface base, and they're going to celebrate. All the Kerbals are down on the surface, so they're going to hang out on these lawn chairs on the porch, if you will, take in the view, take in the sights, just enjoy themselves. And of course, we're also going to fire off some fireworks as well to celebrate this amazing accomplishment. Congratulations, Jeb, Bill, Bersby, and to all the Kerbals who came out here and colonized Duna and made this all happen. Guys, this was a really fun episode to film. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I will see you all next time in the next episode of Kerbin. The final part of this series, of course, is to colonize Laythe. So that's what our final focus is going to be on. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.